Oh, there's so many yummy vegetarian options out there. You could try like lentil soup, veggie burgers, tofu stir fry. The possibilities are endless. So let's just jump right in with the big question, the one that really gets to the heart of the whole Dutch approach. In the Netherlands, is prostitution actually considered a job? Well, the short answer, yeah, it is. But that yes comes with a lot of fine print. We're talking about a whole system of rules and responsibilities. This is not a free-for-all by any stretch. It's a seriously managed industry. And this is where things get really interesting, right? It's all about a massive shift in thinking. Instead of making it a crime, the Dutch model says, okay, let's treat this like any other business. The whole idea is if you bring it out into the open, you can actually regulate it. You can protect people and focus on public health. It's way more about being pragmatic than making a moral judgment.
Okay, so if it's a legal profession, how does that actually work? How is it all governed? Let's really get into the nitty-gritty because the rules are what make this whole system so different.
All right, here's a super important point to grasp. There's no single rule book for the whole country. The national government basically says, okay, this is legal, but then they hand over the real power to the individual cities, the municipalities. So what that means is the rules in Amsterdam could be completely different from a smaller town. You end up with this kind of patchwork of different policies all across the Netherlands. And this really hammers home that whole it's a job idea. If you want to operate legally, doesn't matter if you're running a whole club or just working for yourself, you have to jump through the same hoops as any other small business owner. You got to get your permits, register your business, and yep, you have to pay taxes. It's completely woven into the regular commercial system. But look, legal doesn't mean it's the Wild West. The boundaries are super strict. Get this, individual cities can even raise the minimum age. The national minimum might be 18, but a lot of places bump it up to 21 for extra protection. And things like unlicensed brothels or street soliciting, almost totally illegal. The idea is to push everything into spaces that can actually be managed and monitored. And of course, anything, and I mean anything that involves coercion or human trafficking, is a major crime, full stop. So we've talked about the system, but what about the people at the very heart of it? What's the day-to-day reality for the workers, and what kind of safety measures are actually there to protect them? The industry is definitely changing. You've got the classic, super visible window-style brothels, right? The ones everyone thinks of. Those are pretty easy for the authorities to keep an eye on. But now there's this huge, booming online and private scene. And this move to websites and apps gives workers a lot more independence for sure, but it also throws a wrench in the works. I mean, how do you regulate? How do you keep someone safe when they're working out of a private apartment they booked online? It's a whole new ballgame. And the workforce itself is incredibly diverse. We're mostly talking about adults, in their 20s and 30s. But a really significant number are migrants coming from all over. Eastern Europe, South America, Africa. And that international aspect, well, that adds a whole other layer of complexity. Suddenly you're dealing with visas, work permits, and the constant challenge of preventing labor exploitation. Now, a massive piece of this whole puzzle, maybe the cornerstone really, is public health. The logic is actually pretty straightforward. If you're going to call it a legal profession, then you have to treat it like one. And that means occupational health and safety standards have to apply, just like any other job. And they don't just talk the talk. Here's how they actually put that principle into practice. You've got this national institute, the RIVM, that's tracking health trends across the country. And then at the local level, there's a whole network of sexual health centers offering support, often free, low cost, and totally anonymous. It's this whole infrastructure that really makes the public health focus a reality, on the ground. But the system is far from perfect. It's got some major points of tension. And honestly, one of the biggest challenges wasn't even something they planned for. It's an unintended side effect. Massive, overwhelming tourism. And this right here just nails the core conflict, especially in a place like Amsterdam's red light district. On one side, you have this huge economic engine, this massive tourist attraction. But on the other side, you've got the people who actually live there, whose lives are being totally disrupted by all the noise and chaos. So, to deal with this mess, cities like Amsterdam are trying all sorts of things. They've already banned guided tours to try and thin out the crowds. And they're even talking about something really radical, moving the window brothels completely out of the city center. It's just this constant, tricky balancing act between making money, protecting residents, and keeping workers safe.
And all of this really brings us to a crucial takeaway. Legalization is not some magic wand that fixes everything. The Dutch model has been around for decades, and yet it's still grappling with some really big unresolved problems. I mean, even with all these regulations, the terrible risk of human trafficking is still there. It hasn't gone away. Plus, that whole shift to online platforms we talked about, it just makes it that much harder for authorities to know what's going on behind closed doors. And that fundamental conflict, the one we saw in Amsterdam, balancing the industry with the community, that's a never-ending political fight.
And check this out. Here's a really fascinating debate happening within the system. Some people are saying, hey, to get more control, let's make every single sex worker register. But a lot of workers and their advocates are pushing back, and they're pushing back hard. They're worried a big central database would just lead to more surveillance, a total loss of privacy, and could even be used against them, destroying the very trust that makes the whole system work in the first place. So, when you boil it all down, what is the Dutch model? It's this incredibly complex machine, right? It's a mix of national legalization, local city-level control, and a huge focus on public health. But it's also constantly caught in this tug-of-war with these massive forces of tourism, technology, and crime. Which leaves us with the million-dollar question. The whole point of this entire system is protection, right? Protection for the workers, for the public, for the residents. But is this incredibly complicated web of rules and regulations really the best way to get there? Well, that is the question at the heart of the debate, and it's one that's far from settled.